SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome. My name is Amrita Shah. I am an author of non-fiction books, and the course I am teaching is called Appreciating and Writing Popular English Non-Fiction Books. This is lecture 1. It's called Why Popular Non-Fiction? A Course Introduction. This course is an elective course for students at the MA level, students of communication. But I believe it could be useful for students of any discipline who have an interest in the written word. In fact, at a time when communication and information play such a key role in defining careers, an interest in reading and an aptitude for writing well are probably very useful skills for anyone to possess. Apart, of course, from the functional purpose, books are a form of cultural enrichment. We are made more aware of our world through reading, and the ability to appreciate books and get habituated to reading are probably extremely useful skills for anyone to possess. As you all know, we live in an extremely complex and fast evolving world. Technology is evolving rapidly. Globalization has brought so many changes in our lives through travel and through improved communication. Um, the number of changes that have happened are so fast and so kind of transformative that we don't even have time to grapple with them. Look at the pandemic, for instance. It completely changed the way we lived our lives. So now, how do we make sense of this fast evolving world and its many challenges? How do we make sense of how these changes have impacted our lives and the way we work? How do we make sense of the way these changes and shifts and innovations have reshaped our world politically, socially, culturally, and economically? Conventionally, we would have looked to the media for cues in this regard, right? The media, which is radio, newspapers, magazines, television, they would have told us what is happening in the world and how to make sense of it. In fact, currently the media is a behemoth. It has grown exponentially over the years, and it has a massive and proliferating presence in the world, and certainly in India, where we live. Let us take a look at some figures of India's changing media landscape. India has 900 television channels, over 550 radio stations, 100 million registered publications, and 560 million people using the internet. These are huge numbers by any standard. And we don't just have the official media, we also have social media. We have 400 million people on WhatsApp, 260 million on Facebook, 200 million people use TikTok before its ban in India. 80 million people have Instagram accounts. And then add to this, we have access to global media through satellite TV and the internet. So, just so much information. We are besieged on a daily, no, a minute by minute basis by information, news, advertisements, deals, gossip. And how do we feel with all this information? Do we feel inundated? Do we feel that this is too much? Some of it is very superficial, or that we are being exposed to a lot of reportage, controversies. We're getting news from our phone, from our computer, from our television, from the newspaper, and just so much coming at you. Is it like an overload? Does all this make you feel confused? Often because the media gives you blow by blow account of what's happening on the ground, but it does not necessarily does not have the space or the time perhaps very often to give you perspective. So it may be that you find yourself listening to people being interviewed experts, but without actually quite understanding the perspective that they are bringing to it, what they're referring to, previous events perhaps that have a bearing on current events, but you feel that the context is missing. Then, of course, there is the problem of what is credible and what is not. We hear the term fake news a lot these days, and simply because so much of the news that is coming to us is unfiltered. So it can be coming from sources that are perhaps not credible, or perhaps designed to mislead, or not consciously, but just passing on gossip and rumors. So it tends to kind of make you not sure what to believe and what not to believe. Does it make you feel agitated? So many things coming to you at once, every minute, something dramatic and told to you in a dramatic style, which makes you feel constantly on edge. And yet, do you feel addicted? Feel that it is impossible to turn off this flow of news, that you need to let it keep coming to you? And does all of it make you feel exhausted? I know it does make me feel exhausted. This constant sort of flow of news without any context. So perhaps this is how you may be feeling in today's world: inundated, confused, addicted, agitated, exhausted. And yet, as I said, we go on scrolling. Now, I'm not suggesting that the news media does not have an extremely important role to play, nor am I suggesting that social media has no place in our world. In fact, no one can deny the benefits of the new communication technologies and how much they have transformed our world, also for the better in so many ways. But with it have come some problems, problems of excess, of commercialization, of fake news, etc. And we do have to find a way around them. Some kind of balance has to be restored. Um, I am suggesting, of course, that one can look at nonfiction books to provide that balance. Let me kind of give you a couple of examples. I'm trying to kind of show you nonfiction books in the context of current news at the moment, to show how it can be a sort of restorative, or provide a perspective where we feel that some of it is lacking. Let us take, for instance, the current big story that is occupying or preoccupying the news media around the world. This is the Hamas Israel conflict, which, when I'm recording this at the beginning of 2024, is still extremely top of mind for people around the world. Um, when this conflict broke out a few months ago, you found that people were torn into different sorts of camps, taking opposite positions. You had historians taking different positions, you had students on campuses taking some position, you had citizens' protests taking one position, you had governments across the world taking another position. And as a reader, or someone who wants to be aware of what is going on in the world, I can imagine one may not kind of be quite sure how to think about this, how to think about this extremely important issue in which so many people have been losing their lives. Um, it is interesting to me to look at the fact that at this particular point, news media organizations look towards books. Let me pull out two examples from the many, in fact, that appeared at this time. Here is the publication Foreign Policy, which suggested the best books for understanding the Israel Hamas war. And here is the Indian Express, which said 5 books to read on the Israel Palestine conflict. You may look at these titles if the subject is of interest to you and you want to explore it further. Let me go back. And here is the point I'm trying to make here is that books have a certain value uh, in our fast changing world, even though they sort of take more time to read than the news flash that comes at you across a screen. Books have a value. They have a value and the ability to enhance our understanding in ways that other forms of communication lack. Books can offer background, they can offer context, history, and tools that help you make sense of why things are as they are and to form a more informed assessment. Let us go from war to show business. And let me take an example of other news stories that and kind of try and bring the nonfiction book into these stories. In October 2023, Matthew Perry, the comic actor who shot to fame with his role as Chandler Bing on the American sitcom Friends, and who had a history of substance abuse, was found dead in mysterious circumstances at the age of 54. It was a shocking piece of news for millions of his fans, more so because the actor had been a talented comedian with wit and a sense of comic timing. And the idea that someone who could make sort of so many people laugh could himself have been in so much pain was a question on many minds. Now, it is a feature of our celebrity obsessed culture that we look towards, we look to famous people for life lessons. This is this is a trend that you may or may not like, but this is what we have at the moment. And so when something like this happens, when a much beloved actor commits sort of dies in mysterious circumstances, it does create a certain distress and a search for answers on the part of the public. And as it happened, the actor had released a memoir the previous year. The book was called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, and talked about the challenges he had faced with depression and his many battles with substance abuse. The book had been a bestseller, but in light of this recent event, it became something more, a refuge for his distressed fans, and also a way for people to try and understand the many complexities, perhaps, of the human condition. A similar trend was observed when two other celebrities, the celebrity traveling chef Anthony Bourdain and the comic actor Robin Williams, committed suicide. And again, you have the books that these two wrote playing quite a pivotal role at this point in at least trying to kind of, this is what people look towards to try and understand and try and understand the pain, perhaps the kind of complexities that led to these situations. Now, I have given two examples of books related to and in the light of news and current affairs. Not all the books we will be talking about are related to news and current affairs, not at all. But I think it is not a bad place to begin with because our subject is popular non-fiction books, which means books that are in some form or the other connected with the world, the real world that we live in, and are based on fact. Popular non-fiction books in some form or the other are factual accounts of the world in which we live. This is a brief definition, and we will discuss it in greater detail in the following lectures. We will discuss literary genres and how non-fiction differs from them, and also what we mean when we say popular non-fiction. But since we have begun with news media and social media and current affairs, I suggest that we can start with sort of looking at some features of these books that we are going to be discussing with reference to news media and social media. It is often said that media is history in a hurry. The media scores on immediacy and reach, but a book offers more space and takes longer to write, offering the possibility of an argument evolved over time. Also, a book published by a reputed publisher will have been vetted and fact-checked for mistakes, reducing the possibility of fake news and misinformation, both of which are fairly rampant on social media. You can also, with a book, you can also look up a writer's credentials and see if he or she has the required expertise to write on the subject. Books offer a more unified and intense experience compared to the sort of flickering offerings and randomness of social media. In fact, the excessive choice on the internet can be bewildering and encourage passive consumption, which can be addictive. A book, on the other hand, as you well know, is sort of, because it has been sort of deliberated upon and crafted, is more difficult to read. It invites you as a reader to engage more actively and has the capacity to stimulate your imagination, to provoke you to think and invite you to reflect. I'm not suggesting that news media and social media do not do these things, but there is something about a book which kind of invites you to sort of slow down and reflect a little more, kind of be a little more alert, to grasp what is being said. It's a little more difficult, but for that reason, it perhaps encourages active attention rather than passive consumption. Okay. But of course, when I'm talking about all these, I'm kind of giving you these sort of positives about nonfiction books. I mean, good books. I'm thinking about books that are well written, reputed books. And this is not true of all books, of course. Many books can be of extremely poor quality and not at all good reads. So when I say not all books are good or comparable in quality, how do you tell the difference? Um, you may well ask, and hopefully this course will help you do that. So I think this is a good time to talk about what the course will do. What the course will do. Perhaps a good way to start is for me to try and say something about how I see you. Um, I cannot, of course, see you, and I don't know who you are and who many of you, I mean, how the different kinds of people who are here listening to me. And so I have to assume certain things about you. So I'm going to kind of assume these various things. Let me assume that you are one, an ardent reader, someone who has grown up with books, surrounded by books, who has been introduced to books at a very early age and has been encouraged to read by parents or relatives or a concerned teacher. That could be one of you. Perhaps you have an interest in writing. Maybe you have been in the habit of writing for years. Since some of you are students of communication, perhaps you want to be journalists or documentary filmmakers. Um, Perhaps some of you are very curious, want to write about things that happen around you. So when we're talking about nonfiction, the idea of facts and the real world is of interest to you. Perhaps you are an aspiring writer or someone who has always wanted to write a book or many books. And it's likely that if you are an aspiring writer, then you would also have a great interest in reading. But let me also assume that you are neither a reader nor a writer, but someone with a curiosity about the world and about things that happen in the world, and you think that books might provide a window to this world and would like to inculcate a reading habit. Um, Perhaps you have come across bookshops or you have come across newspaper articles on books. You kind of heard about new books coming into the market and you're curious to know what the excitement is about. Or perhaps you want to use books as a form of self improvement. Books are known to improve your powers of articulation, your powers of comprehension, and of course, provide you with more knowledge, help you focus, to concentrate, and to persevere. That could also be one kind of listener. Or perhaps you have an interest in a subject. It could be politics, it could be gardening, it could be science, it could be um, a war, the history of war, for instance. And perhaps you want to you think that books might be a form in which you can communicate your interest, share your interest, the specialization that you have acquired with the world, with the reading public. So Whether you're a reader, a writer, a journalist, a citizen, just concerned, just curious, looking for self improvement, all these are good enough reasons to be here. My aim is to guide you through the world of nonfiction. I would like to introduce you to the variety and possibilities of nonfiction books. Having said that, you could very well say who has the time to read everything. You have to, of course, choose according to your interests and priorities. And when I say that I'm going to help you enter the world of nonfiction, there is an idea of this kind of huge and immense world of books, and it's a mind-boggling kind of diversity, so a diverse selection. So how do you know? How do you know what to choose, when to read, how to read? And when you're talking about reading well, which is what we are kind of aiming for, um, how do you know? And we talked about good books versus bad books. So, how do you know how to choose, how to select, how to differentiate? And also, how do you know how to inculcate what we call taste? You know, we use that word in a variety of fields. When we talk about someone who has good taste in food, or good taste in design, or good taste in clothes, we're talking about a particular sensibility, a certain refinement. Um, Taste, of course, is a very kind of controversial word. Um, People use taste in often to sort of try and privilege a certain kind of literature over others, a certain kind of fashion over others, and in our more democratic times, we would like taste to be not so sort of set in stone. And I believe that taste should be something that is more sort of more tailored to what a person likes and does not like. One person's taste could be a good taste, could be another person's something that another person absolutely does not like. So, two things. I mean, one is we do have to develop something approaching taste. We do have to find a way of selecting and understanding what is good and what we will like and what we should read. And yet at the same time, we want to kind of figure out something that suits us, and not necessarily kind of blindly follow trends, right? So how do we go about this? So reading about books is one way of judging. If you read newspaper articles about books, or you listen to podcasts about books, or listen to people who read a lot talk about books, read reviews, listen to friends who have recommendations, this is all useful, and this is about what you should read. I mean, someone telling you that, oh, this is a very good book, or you could check it out for yourself. But here in this course, we will also be thinking about how we should read. Um, in the course of these lectures, I will be mentioning many book titles, and I will also be reading from many books. Um, I have deliberately chosen a very wide range of titles, keeping the diversity of my audience in mind. My idea is to expose you to all kinds of works, so that you have the opportunity to know the possibilities of what is out there. And then, of course, as I said, you then choose once you kind of get some sense of this world. I have mixed Indian titles with the international ones, though I have tried to keep the ratio of the local quite high. I have mixed older, well-known books with new ones, and I have mixed easy to read and very light books with very ambitious ones. Again, as I said, to cater to a broad mix of tastes and to provide a sort of idea of the range of what exists. Needless to say that they are all in English, or at least if they originated in another language, then they are available in translation. They've been translated into English. And this is not because, I mean, there are some wonderful books, non-fiction books in the regional languages in India, and of course in non-English languages of the world. But we do have to. This is a limitation that one has imposed just so that that one can start somewhere. Um, The idea is that by talking about books and by looking at books and by thinking about them, we will explore the range, as I said, of possibilities that you may never have known about. And we will talk about the many types of books that can and do exist in the world. We will talk about what is in those books and how it came to be there. This is not a practical course, as in you will not be, I'm not actually asking you to undergo reading or writing exercises. Um, but I will be assigning some sort of homework or an assignment at the end of most of the lectures. Um, of course, it's up to you how much of it you do and how well you do it. But if you do follow this after each lecture, it will help you implement some of the things we might have covered in each session, and also it will allow you to reflect on various points and techniques with the benefit of first-hand experience. Okay. Um, so as I said, broadly speaking, this course invites you to enter a particular genre of literature and books as a reader or as a writer. And the genre, of course, is popular non-fiction. Hopefully, this course will equip you with tools to appreciate this genre and its range, and it will provide you with direction and guidelines should you wish to write a non-fiction book yourself. We will also, very importantly, be thinking about craft. How do books emerge? Who writes books and why? What are the techniques of writing and what is style? Okay, these are some of the questions that we will be looking at. The emergence of books. Who is the author who's writing these books? And why is she or he writing these books? What are the various techniques of writing? What is style? So on and so forth. I mean, these are just some of the aspects of craft that we will be looking at. We will be exploring craft in much greater detail. And thinking and reviewing matters of craft will help us appreciate the process of writing and creating. And this will help those of you who wish to write a book yourself. Now, let me clarify that writing a book is by no means an easy task. It's an extremely hard undertaking. It requires a great deal of time. It requires a great deal of effort and labor, and it's an extremely solitary kind of activity. And it requires a very great deal of kind of motivation, self motivation, perseverance, patience, and not everyone wants to or even has the desire to do so. But if you do have the inclination, as I said, then this course will equip you with some tools, or at least give you a sense of what it is that a writer does, which gives you some kind of understanding to take forward, and to kind of weigh your own options, if you wish. And if you are not a writer but primarily a reader, how will this help you? As I said before, appreciating books. This is a course that also teaches you how to sort of guides you on a journey into kind of reading books as well, and understanding craft, understanding what goes into the writing of a book is an extremely good way to kind of start appreciating a book better. Because normally, if you're just reading something without any kind of awareness of how that came to be created, then you will have a certain kind of perhaps grasp and enjoyment of the content and the style. But to relish it better, to actually be able to then, as I said, differentiate between a good book and a not so good book, to understand how well a book has been researched and how well the author has used style to communicate, so on and so forth. The idea of also developing what we've been calling taste in books, all these are kind of helped by understanding matters of craft and taking that bit of a journey into the world of nonfiction from this perspective, or kind of entering it into a more deeper, a kind of slightly more deeper, with a deeper engagement. So hopefully that with this course you will find yourself immersed in a world of words and what they convey. Um, the American astronomer and science communicator Carl Sagan has a very says something quite wonderful about books, which I want to highlight over here. He says, "What an astonishing thing a book is! It's a flat object made from a tree with flexible parts on which are imprinted lots of funny dark squiggles. But one glance at it, and you're inside the mind of another person, maybe somebody dead for thousands of years. Across the millennia, an author is speaking clearly and silently inside your head, directly to you. Writing is perhaps the greatest of human inventions, binding together people who never knew each other, citizens of distant epochs. Books break the shackles of time. A book is proof that humans are capable of working magic." Let me leave you with this for a second or two, just to reflect on. Think about what he's saying, the power of these, what he calls funny dark squiggles, the ability to kind of just look at a page and enter into a mind across time, across epochs. And you have someone speaking clearly inside your head, directly to you, and where everything else is quiet, not filled with a lot of noise and stimulation, but just this one voice, and establishing a connection with you as a reader. It's just you and the writer in this space, and which is why I guess he's saying writing is perhaps the greatest of human inventions, binding together people who never knew each other, citizens of distant epochs, breaking the shackles of time. A book is proof that humans are capable of working magic. So he's using the word, a very powerful word, magic, to describe what human beings do when they create a book. So let us enter this magical world. But of course, there is magic and there is the real world. And what we are kind of trying to do in this course is trying to combine the two. We are going to be entering a magical world, but it is also the real world, because the genre that we are talking about, the genre of popular nonfiction, is about facts and it's about the real world. And so let me bring you from Sagan's wonderfully evocative quote and this sort of idea of magic to the real world. And let me just show you quickly just the way people sort of showcase nonfiction, the best nonfiction books of each year, for instance. Or here's another newspaper piece on nonfiction books. So now let's look at how you, as the listener and viewer, can take this forward after this one lecture. What will you do once this lecture ends to take this forward on your own? What I would like you to do is go look at books, feel them, smell them. Books have a very kind of that sort of tangible effect of, the books. Smell the books. If it's an old book, then it has that lovely paper smell. The ink has a particular smell. These are all kind of things that bind a reader to books. Of course, now we do not look necessarily, we do not read from physical books, we read online, which again is fine. If you're reading on an e-reader, for instance, then look at the font, play around with the size, look at the way the page, the way the words have been arranged, the look at the little symbols that the publisher might have put up or down, see where the page number is placed. All this, because we are doing a course that allows us to engage with books more deeply. These are all ways of establishing a connection with our subject. So look at books, as I said. Read them if you have the time right now. Look at book covers. Look at book covers in a bookshop or online. Wander into a library if you can. Again, look at books, take them out at random, study them. Get familiar with books. That is the assignment. Get familiar with books. Read, read slowly. Think about what you are reading, but also think about the writer who has put the words there, who has arranged them a certain way, and what effort it must have taken to produce those paragraphs and to create the book in which you find them. So we are going to, through looking at various book titles, by listening to my reading a few paragraphs from several books, from your reading, now that you've started on this course, if you will start, go back to books that you have already read, look at new books, start looking at words again, knowing that you are kind of establishing a deeper connection with this subject. And it's not just about reading the words themselves and grasping the content. Get a sense of this being an object produced by someone sitting in a room far away, and establishing a connection with that person and with the craft that has enabled this book to come about. Before we end, I want to introduce a feature which I call On the Bookshelf. Um, this feature we will have in most of the lectures, where I will introduce you to some writers and books. Of course, we will be talking about books throughout the lectures. So I will be showcasing various titles and authors as we proceed. As I said, I'm mixing recent works and old works, recent bestsellers and old works, also titles from everywhere. But since we are at the beginning of this course and this is an introductory course, I thought I would start with some kind of more classic examples of popular nonfiction. So this first book is a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. You may be familiar with this book. Certainly, older people that you may know will definitely have heard of this book. It was the book that, as a child, I was encouraged to read by my parents, and I think it was probably the first a non-fiction book, written for adults that I probably read, and I remember it being a very kind of simply, very nicely written book, a kind of course, motivational book about interpersonal relationships, how to deal with people. I remember this one particular anecdote that the writer has in the book, where I think a person goes to a post office, and the person behind the counter is a very surly person and is in a very kind of bad mood, and this person sort of thinks, how can I change this around, this encounter, and I think he says something nice to the person, which makes the person react with a smile, and everything changes in that moment. Just everything changes, and it's, I'm not sure I remember this exactly as it was. I would have to go back to the book to read it, but you can imagine that the reason why perhaps this book is so popular, it's sold now about 30 million copies worldwide, and it is one of the best-selling books of all time. And you can imagine that it must have it had extremely um, uh, practical advice. It must have had, very kind of powerful, enduring advice on how people should deal with each other. So much so that since 1936, when it was written, it's still selling, and I still see it in on lists of nonfiction books. And in fact, I think an influential magazine even put it at number 19 on the most influential books of all time. Uh, some parts, I mean, apparently over the years, it has been changed a little bit. The language has been made more contemporary, and I believe there have been some cuts. Some cuts have been made to the book, and perhaps a sort of slight adaptation. But as I said, this is a sort of a classic book that I have from as a memory from my childhood, and has sort of left me with this idea of how by thinking positively, by thinking in ways that would make an atmosphere kind of lighter and friendlier, you can change things around for yourself. And I suppose we all need this in our kind of fast-paced world, where we are exposed now more and more to new people, unfamiliar things all the time. And so I suppose this book is one of those kind of classic, enduring pieces of nonfiction that would be relevant at any time. The other book I have picked, and the other author is actually quite different, much more recent, but very different also in tone. Um, this is a book called The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe was an American journalist and writer who was associated with a very fresh style of writing that came into vogue in the 1960s and 1970s. It was called the New Journalism. And we are going to talk more about new journalism in when we talk about style. But just to briefly tell you what new journalism was, it was a way of telling. You are familiar with news reports. You are familiar with a way newspaper stories are written. Yesterday a car crash happened. Nobody was injured, but a car driving from X place to Y place, um, sort of hurtled towards a barrier. It's sort of straightforward facts, right? What they did with new journalism, the group of sort of writers who started practicing this new form, it was a kind of introduction of a new style, where they started telling sort of writing journalism, narrating it like a story. So it was almost like, if you recall. I mean, if you're watching a film, then you're kind of uh, the story just flows. People talk, and the action happens, and you also look at the place. This is what they did. They started kind of evoking the place with detail, with observation. They started using dialogue and voices, and it was a extremely wonderful way of engaging the reader, and it had a very influential role in shaping the way nonfiction books were also written later. So this is important. This is a kind of landmark book, or at least, well, the author has written many others. But so, as I said, in terms of style, this is a moment to make note of. This particular book was published in 1979. You may have read it or seen the film or the television series that came out of it. It is about pilots engaged in US post-war research with experimental rocket-powered high-speed aircraft, as well as it documented the stories of the first astronauts selected for NASA's Project Mercury program. Wolf was inspired by the desire to find out why the astronauts accepted the danger of space flight. And in those days, of course, it was, I mean, it is always dangerous, dangerous undertaking, but in those early days, it was even considered even more so. And the book itself is based on extensive research by Wolf. In fact, extensive research is a hallmark of the new journalism. Wolf interviewed test pilots, the astronauts, their wives, and many, many others. So, as I said, new journalism, and we will talk more about it later. Now, this third example that I'm going to refer to is of someone who we all know well. But I'm sure you are going to be surprised to find me referring to this person in this context. This is a person who we know as a leader, we know as someone who is very important in the history of modern India, but we do not necessarily think of this person as a non-fiction writer. And the person I am referring to is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. We know of Gandhi's role as a leader of the Indian freedom movement, but many of us most likely do not know that he also wrote extensively. In fact, for him, the written word was a very, very powerful tool for disseminating his views and actually sharing his approach to life and political action. In fact, he was a very, very he read very, very widely in the early days. In fact, when he was a young man, perhaps you know something of his biography, where the fact that he went to South Africa as a young lawyer to appear in a case for a trader based over there, an Indian trader based in South Africa. And he had a lot of time in those days. This is in the early 1900s. This was, sorry, the late 19th century. So, and he was by himself for a long time there. Before that, he was a student in London. He was studying law. And in all these years, as a student and as a young lawyer, he read a great deal. In fact, one of his regrets in later life was that he did not have enough time to read as much as he would like. But as I said, he was also writing extensively. In South Africa, he started 2 publications, and he went on to. I'm sorry. He started a newspaper in South Africa. Pardon me. And he went on to start another publication in India, and so he was a journalist in some senses, where he was very much involved in the production of these publications. Gandhi started a publication in a newspaper in South Africa called Indian Opinion, and he also ran a publication in India. He used these to disseminate his views, but also the way he shaped the newspaper, and the kind of subjects that he covered. There was a very deep engagement, as I suppose, as a journalist, you can say, or as an editor, or someone who conceptualized publications as a form of communicating and participating in sort of social action. So Gandhi, as I said, was many things. He was a leader. He was an activist. He was a journalist, and you could sort of say that he actually conceptualized forms of communication. And he also had a very important impact on language, on the way he used language. He wrote much of his writing was in Gujarati, even though he referred to works from all over the world. because he was a very kind of widely read and very erudite person. Um, but the way he used language, he used very crisp and very simple words. Um, the idea was to kind of be very clear and reach, I suppose, as many kinds of people as he could, so that he did not, even though he was describing sometimes very complex ideas, he tried to keep the language simple. But right now, in this context, of course, what I am talking about are the books he wrote. We're going to look at some of the books he wrote. The most famous book, of course, of nonfiction that he wrote was his 1929 autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth, which was a very rare autobiography, in the sense that Indians were not, we were not inclined in the past to write autobiographies. And so this was a kind of rare occasion when, he decided to put down, just like a sort of almost like a scientist, because even the word experiments has a certain kind of a meaning. He wrote down, uh, just like a scientist records experiments in the laboratory. He wrote down his experiments, as he calls it, with truth. His other well-known books that we're looking at here, this one is called Hind Swaraj, or Indian Home Rule. He wrote this book while he was traveling on a steamer from London to South Africa. I mean, he had gone there to plead the case of Indians against a particular law that the colonial government had introduced in South Africa. And he wrote this in I suppose what was a kind of a sense, with a sense of, in a sense, in a mood of dejection. Though the book, of course, it does not actually reflect that. The book is written in a question answer form and deals with not just sort of, it's not just it's political, but political also by talking about modernity and thoughts on what civilization means. And it talks about all kinds of things. It talks about our modern lives, and reflects on these, as I said, through a question answer format. And again, this was a very controversial book in its time. It was actually banned in India by the colonial government over here. Um, and But it still endures, and it's a very important sort of book to look into Gandhi's mind and his ideas. Then there is Satyagraha in South Africa, which was mostly written or while he was in Yerwada jail, and when he was, after he had returned from South Africa and come back to India, and when he was leading the freedom movement. Some of it was written after he left jail, but it was written, as he says, in fact, in the book, without papers or anything. He wanted to record his experience of the campaign he led in South Africa to serve. Again, he's very much like a kind of like a scientist. It's recording his experiments so that others can then learn from it, and can apply the learning from this experiment that he carried out. And this book, in fact, much of it was dictated to a fellow prisoner, Indulali Agnik, while he was in jail. And as I says, it records his campaign in South Africa, because that was when he actually came to kind of practice his. Because Gandhi was a lawyer when he went there. He did not have any ideas of being an activist, or even kind of any sort of. He was a very young man, and he did not perhaps have any thoughts about colonization, empire, or what India and Indians should do, or freedom, or none of these were at that point in his mind. These were ideas that came to him as he lived there, as he experienced certain forms of discrimination, as he looked at the plight of his fellow Indians around him, and then perhaps sort of combined all the reading that he had done, all the reading, in fact, of many great English writers that that sort of started, that enabled him to ask questions, and to think about the things that then eventually, I suppose, resulted in many of the sort of ideas that we take for granted now, that we should be free people, that we are born equal, and so on and so forth. So these were all ideas, as I said, which he recorded, and this is important to emphasize. We're talking about nonfiction and the value of nonfiction. There are many kind of reasons why we should read, and how it enriches our life, how nonfiction can enrich our life. But one of the ways is in being a guide to us. First of all, sort of, it exposes different worlds to us. It could tell us how to do certain things to make our lives better. You could read it for enjoyment, along with being informed about the world, and you could read it to sort of reflect, someone who has gone through many great works of writing and experiences, fascinating experiences that shaped that person's life, and then shares that understanding, that knowledge with us. That can be a very valuable resource for us to have, and it is there. And in this course, that's what we're going to look into. We're going to explore this world, that and access it. In the next lecture we will look at literary genres and how popular nonfiction fits into this range of literary genres, and also what we mean by popular nonfiction. With this, we conclude lecture 1, this introductory lecture of our course, Appreciating and Writing Popular English Nonfiction Books. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome to this piece of literary snippet. Perhaps the most popular literary genre after novel is the short story. Sharp, compact narratives whose charm lies not only in what is said but also in what remains unsaid. Today I'll be reading one of the shortest instances of a short story that I have ever encountered, and indeed the very charm of this particular story that I'm going to read out today lies in the way it abruptly ends. It is an ancient tale from Mesopotamia which has been retold by several authors, among whom the name of Somerset Maugham stands out. The adaptation that I'll be reading out is perhaps the closest to the one that Maugham wrote. The story is titled, in all of its adaptations almost, as Appointment in Samara. Here is the story. A merchant in Baghdad once sent one of his servants to the market. The servant was supposed to buy provisions for the merchant, but when he returned, he came back empty-handed. Indeed, the servant had all gone white, and trembling with fear, he told his master that he had met death in the marketplace. When I entered the market, the servant said to his master, I was jostled by a woman, and when I turned to look at her, I saw that she was Death. I am very scared, Master, because Death looked at me with a threatening gesture. Can you please lend me your horse so that I can fly away from Baghdad to the town of Samarra and thereby escape death?" The master, being a good man, gave his servant his best horse and saw him gallop off to Samarra to escape death. Then the master himself went to the marketplace and confronted Death. "Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant?" asked the master to Death. And Death replied, "It was not a threatening gesture. Rather, it was a start of surprise. I was astonished to see your servant here today, because this evening I have an appointment with him in Samarra." See you in the next episode of Literary Snippet.